We are here today to talk just really quickly about transitioning agents to work from home. This is something that we have been helping our customers with for quite a while, and we are getting a lot of questions right now because given everything that's going on, a lot of folks got to quickly transition agents to a work at home model who've never done it before, or at a bigger scale than ever before. And that's something that Adrian and Christian have a lot of experience with. For quick background, I'm Lindsay. I lead marketing here at Observe. Adrian leads our onboarding team and has worked in contact centers for many years, training big contact center teams. And Christian leads our sales engineering team and will address some of the technical and security aspects. So we have an agenda here that we've basically developed from your questions, questions that have been submitted to us. But to kick it off, I thought we could just set the stage and share a little bit about what we do and why we're talking about this topic today. And Christian, I thought I could turn that over to you.
Okay, sure. So in the call centers that we're used to, we've got really good metrics around things like how many calls are coming in, the queue time, what skill they're going to, what happens in the IVR, what the average handle time is by skill or by line of business or by agent. So we've got all this metadata about the calls, but what actually happens inside each phone call, like what questions did the customer ask? Did the agent respond properly? Did they say the right compliance scripts? What happens inside the phone call to date has almost been like a black box. And so we've got this manual QA process that takes a lot of manual time, it's effort, it's pretty slow. What Observe does is we take all the calls that are happening in the call center and analyze them via automation. And so that all that information about like what happened in that call, did the right things happen, did the wrong things not happen, we present that really visually and to give you easy access to everything inside your call center.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just add to that, that once you have that data, there are a lot of ways to coach the agents and give them feedback through our platform. So right now with agents working at home, that's really more important for a lot of organizations. The agents aren't on the floor overhearing each other. You can't tap on their shoulder. So Adrian, I thought you could address this one. The most important thing, we've discussed this a little bit, is that you need to keep agents engaged and really coach them a little bit more and better when they're working at home. So could you kind of share some of the best practices you put in place and maybe a story around how you keep remote agents engaged and coached?
Yeah, definitely. So as we all know, at the contact center, if we're there with a team setting, agents they can easily just tap onto their neighbor, ask them for questions, ask them for help. They can raise their hand, get their supervisor's attention or a floor coach attention. So now the supervisors and QA staff and training staff really have to think, how do we engage ourselves with our agents, not knowing if they need assistance? They're not able to quickly seek for help. So now instead of doing the scheduled coachings, it's really important to actually look at the data and see exactly what happened with that agent the day before. Maybe they had some dead air that was coming up on the call, and now you're able to identify, why did that dead air happen? Let me reach out to this agent now, coach them at the beginning of their shift today, and let them know, hey, you're doing a great job. Let's just make sure that we focus on this, and this is where you can find that information. I think something that's very helpful is we look at top performers and bottom performers sometimes differently, but now it's good to engage them as a team that they work from home, so that way they can share their insights, because now they can relate back to their other agents like, hey, I did this, for my home office or for my home living room, and this is how I'm handling situations like this, and I'm able to get to that information faster. So now not only are they getting engagement from their supervisors, but they're getting engagement from their peers, which is really awesome.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And also potentially even allowing them to self-coach, like giving them call snippets to listen to. We know through data that someone handled a call particularly well or turned around sentiment. So self-coaching, peer coaching, small group coaching. But at the end of the day, especially for a supervisor who's maybe doing this the first time, scaling coaching is difficult, right? You got to call people up individually and they need to be coached more to feel really good and supported when they're working from home. So I know you mentioned this before, but being able to see who's doing what well and celebrate that, and who has challenges or opportunities to improve, is really critical. I was actually thinking, Christian, you could follow up on this for me a little bit. A lot of people use Observe to like understand KPIs and benchmarks and to be more transparent with the agents about, how they need to perform and how they're comparing to peers. Can you give us an example of one or two ways people are using like leaderboards and benchmarks and things to keep agents engaged?
Yeah, this is a huge topic. So if you think of like standard agent coaching, it happens maybe once a week, maybe twice a month, something like that, and it's usually like a bigger session. But when people are at home and they don't have that like interaction with people, sometimes they just need more frequent touch points. And so what we're doing through the leaderboard functionality is you can show agent by agent how they're ranking on these different performance criteria. Like maybe there was a new sales script that came out yesterday, or something changed on compliance, and you want to know like who's doing that right, who needs some up coaching. So what we've seen is really helpful is to perform these micro coaching sessions. And so you can like find the calls that they're doing something great on, or find the calls where something is going wrong on, and just provide feedback directly to the agent in the tool so that they can get like that micro coaching that like, hey, right here, perfect job. Right here, you need to adjust this. And you don't necessarily need that hour-long coaching session once a week or twice a month, but you can just get that like little micro adjustments for your agents. And especially working from home, just getting that like more frequent guidance has really helped the engagement from the agents.
Yeah, that's a really, really great point. And that actually brings me to the next question, which is really around process. So when you're setting up your process and thinking about transitioning people to work from home or work at home, as some people call it, what are some of the top questions you think businesses should be asking themselves, Christian, to get started successfully?
Yeah, so number one is like the data and the information that you need to do your job. Can you access that from home? Like that's number one. Like if you can't take calls, if you can't see your metrics, like you're going to be screwed. So I'd say that's first off. But then secondly is just making sure that you have like the means of communication, because like Adrian was saying, in a call center, you can raise your hand, you could tap your neighbor. Now, do you have a good chat application for both one-on-one and group chatting? Like how would you push out this new scripting that comes out, or this new agent guidance that comes out to everybody, making sure that's really smooth. And then the training and coaching. And I'm really, especially when working from home, I'm a huge advocate on these like micro coaching sessions to provide guidance. And so how can you quickly provide like really precise, pinpointed advice to the agents so that they know like how to adjust what they're doing? And then the other is like, how do you even know like who's doing what right or wrong? And so we like to set up in our tool, we're using this concept of moments. So you can track like certain things that are happening on different calls. And rather than just randomly like listening to some calls to try to find some coaching advice, you can find those instances that you want to tune on, and just make sure you've got easy access to the data, and that you're not still reliant on these really like manual processes, especially when working remote. It just doesn't work. So you need to find ways to automate all this interactions.
Yeah, absolutely. And to that point, Adrian, can you share some of the moments that clients create and like what they're looking for on these calls to help coach the agents?
Yeah, definitely. So if you think about it again, we don't have the time to really be focusing on scheduled coachings and scheduled up trainings when you're transitioning agents from working at the contact center to actually working from home. So you really need to think about how can I quickly get the agents the feedback that they need instead of waiting for evaluations to be completed or some up training materials to come out. You want to make sure that you create moments around the conversations that you know are happening. So if you know that you have a new product coming out, or if there's a compliance script that is something mandatory that you need to make sure that is happening on every call, this is where you want to create some moments around that to ensure that the agents are saying the scripting that's important to all calls for compliance, and also call opening, making sure that there's no crosstalk happening on the calls. This is all very important information. And if you have that, you can quickly look at the agents and say, hey, you're doing a really good job here. On your calls, I see that 70% of the time you are reading the script that you need to in terms of the terms of service. But let's find out, why is it not happening on the other 30% of the calls? And you can quickly go through 5 to 10 calls in a shorter amount of time by using the moments and tagging the calls and finding them and giving that information back to the agents.
Absolutely. And to that point, I feel like there are kind of two types of insights people are looking for that they can usually get from just being on the floor and walking the halls. One is performance, like we've been talking about, and then the other is really still staying close to the customer experience insights and knowing like what's driving an increase in call volume. Is there an issue with an app or a product or service? You know, what's the context behind these calls and driving them up? So Adrian, I thought you could also talk a little bit about some of the different types of insights people are getting from calls that are even more important when people are working at home.
For sure, definitely. And I think this is very important because it's not always looking at like what's happening with the agents, but what calls are being driven to the agents. So if there's a way for us to identify the type of calls coming in, we might see a high rate of maybe returns or, you know, customer inquiries around a certain topic. We can look into those calls and do we know that we've given the agents the right information for them to handle this? Are the agents well equipped? They're at home. We don't know what they're looking at in the internal knowledge base. We don't know any of it's been shared since this transition happened. But if we can drive into those calls, now we can take this information back to our training department and say, hey, we're getting a lot of calls coming in for X reason. Can you please provide us with some uptraining that we can quickly get back to our agents? I think this is what's very, very important, especially for agents that are working at home, because we want to make sure that we well equip them to handle any type of calls that are coming in, even if it's a new call type that's being driven into the contact center.
Absolutely. And to that point, I know one good place to start is just looking at the dead air on the calls, because dead air signifies that someone might not know how to confidently respond. And that's something you could quickly address with content or training. And, you know, you can even go to an agent who's doing that same type of call well, or a call opener well, and send that snippet so people can hear and replicate. I was also thinking we could talk a little bit about keyword monitoring. And this is something that we do a lot because it's really important to have high transcription accuracy and low false positives. You know, part of what we do is speech analytics, and that's a big part of what people need when they're transitioning to work at home. Can you talk a little bit, Christian, about keyword monitoring and customer sentiment and some of the, maybe tell a story of some of the things a client of ours is doing with these insights?
Yeah, well, and I don't want to talk about coronavirus, but I will just real quick. One sample customer, they work with a lot of universities, and so they've got students calling in looking for guidance, counseling, advice, and different things. And there's been this, as you'd expect, dramatic uptake of people being worried about going onto campus or being near people or other things. And what we found was tons of dead air from the agents right after the students, or the customers in this case, were saying these things, because they've never, like, they don't know how to react to that. I don't know if I would know how to react to that the first time around. And so what we did was we looked for like number one, we looked at things like when people are mentioning coronavirus or being near big groups of people or other types of things like that. And we also found that there's a lot of dead air, like right around that. And so rather than going to the training team and saying, hey, we need some general advice on like what to do around these topics, we were able to tell them, these are the exact questions that customers are asking and how frequently they're asking these questions. And then the training team, rather than just having some generic information to build training off of, they had precise data. We know 3% of the calls are about concerns about going to class. 2% of the calls are about like, I have coronavirus symptoms, things like this. And now we were able to build some like really in-depth, good quality training specifically to what we're actually seeing. And this was all done in the same day. And imagine trying to randomly listen to calls and find this information. But here with keyword mentions and search functionality through the transcriptions, we're able to get down to that like detailed information across 100% of calls like really, really quickly.
Yeah, that's a really interesting story for sure and use case. And you just reminded me of another one before all of this even happened, where we had a pharma company where it's a sensitive conversation when people are calling in about medications or their health, right? And so we found one call that had particularly strong negative sentiment from the customer. And when we played it, it was someone treating the agent really terribly. And it was a really easy way for the supervisor to be alerted and give that person a call and just say, hey, do you want to talk about this? And I think that's something people take for granted sometimes when agents are on the floor, right? Like you have each other to talk each other up. It's a tough job. But when you're at home and maybe you even have your kids underfoot and they're annoying you and all these other things are happening, the news is terrible, I just can see that being overwhelming. So using the insights to provide that extra support and also to empathize with the customers, it's always important. But right now, I think there are definitely people who are getting a lot of calls where it's more important than ever.
Yeah.
Did you have anything to add to that, Adrian, or else we can talk a little bit about technical and security stuff?
No, I think we've pretty much touched on a lot of good points, but I think it's really important, especially with just any special circumstances that may be happening. Being able to get to that data and 100% of that data is so important, because now you can really come back to that agent with you're well prepared to come to this agent and say, hey, I didn't just look at 2-3 calls from your entire month. I saw 100% of what was happening with your calls, and this is how I can really help you out. I'm here for you. I can relate to what you're going through. I get that customer had negative sentiment, but it wasn't your fault. And you did a great job trying to solve that customer's issue. Really, really good job. Let's continue to move this forward, because that one call can really put down an agent's demeanor, and they have a tough job. They're taking call after call after call. And when you come to that agent and only have 2 to 3 calls to really coach them up, it's not really helping them move the needle. And you're really not giving them a lot of data to work with and say, this is where you can truly improve. But now we have 100% of their calls. We have that 100% of that data, and we can really be there and empathize with that agent and say, this is how we can help you get forward together.
100%, no pun intended. And also, I mean, I can't say it enough, but using this as a way to celebrate too. Like every agent is doing something that could possibly be improved, but everybody's doing something well, and often that gets lost. And now, particularly, I think it's really important to be able to call out where they're strong, and kind of give that recognition.
Definitely.
Cool. So just one final question here, and it's really around things that people should watch out for when transitioning to a work at home model. And Christian, I thought you could take this one because some of these are related to like the technical and security and, you know, cloud aspects of doing this. What are some of your thoughts on what to watch out for?
Yeah, I'd say like accessibility is a big thing. So when, let's say I'm part of a QA team or part of a QA team, and we're monitoring calls on the call center site. If we're listening to credit cards, like, you know, that's not a great thing. It's never a good thing, but it's not the worst thing in the world. But especially when you're at home and you're just listening to like credit card numbers all day long, Social Security, like I want nothing to do with that data, like, because that's just a risk in all regards, from all directions. Not that I'm going to do anything bad with it. I just don't want anything to do with it. And so like this is where you can rely on technology to help. So like with tools like Observe, it automatically redacts all the PII, credit card numbers, socials, email addresses, like all that. It just goes away. So now when I'm doing my job as a QA at home, like the data's not even there. I don't care about it, but it's just nice that it's not even there for me to worry about. So just removing that risk is the best way to deal with risk. And then the other thing is like the right access to the right data. So you know, some QA or some supervisors should have access to certain types of calls, not other types of calls. There's just no reason to have everybody access everything. It just opens up too many risk doors. And so with modern cloud-based tools, you can not only just really granularly like limit people's access to what they should have, but you can also change things quickly. So like if supervisors turn over or if they change who they're managing, you need to make sure that like you can respond as quickly as your operations need you to.
Anything to add there, Adrian?
No, I think just like having that quality control, making sure that the right supervisors are looking at the right data, they're only focused on their agents. I think, yeah, having that right access is really good, especially from working from home.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. So that was our first little chat here. First time we're doing this. So thanks for watching. We are going to keep pushing out a bunch of free content to help people out with different topics that are coming up. We've heard a lot also about how to handle call surges, how to put together an incident response plan for the first time. So we're going to launch this tomorrow if you want to download that. We worked with Root Insurance and a couple of our clients on it who learned some of this stuff the hard way and shared their feedback with us. So there are some great templates and stuff you can use in there. Please reach out to us with questions. We're here to help. And yeah, thank you for listening. And thanks, guys, for hopping on.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Take care.
Bye.